Well, today we're going to continue our 4-week focus on stewardship, or the wise use of what we have. And, as we think about the things that we have, whether it be our possessions or our time or our finances, the things that we have, as we shared last week, it can be really tempting. There can be a lot of pressure to keep up with our neighbors. Of course, we mean that figuratively. We want to keep up with other people and what they're doing. We define success by what we have and what we can accumulate, not only the number of things that we have, but the quality of those things. We compare ourselves to other people. We compare ourselves to our neighbors, to people that we see on TV, to celebrities, people that we really have no business comparing ourselves to, because for that matter, we really don't need to compare ourselves to anyone. But we're pressured. We talked about that last week. There's this pressure to try to keep up with what other people are doing, to keep a similar lifestyle, a similar quality of living. And oftentimes we feel this desire to, because we all like to be in comfort, and we all like to be, that instant gratification. We're always tempted to buy now and pay later. We're always tempted to do things that we might not necessarily be in a position financially to do, and then we find ourselves in a difficult financial picture because we've lived above our income, and we find ourselves in a mess. We talked last week about how sometimes we might be in a financially difficult situation, maybe because of decisions like that we've made in the past that we regret. But we also might be that way because of something that's happened to us. It's not always because of something we've done, but sometimes it's because our income level is just enough to cover the bills, and then you have something unfortunate like your car breaks down, or you have a medical expense that is quite large, and it might not even be that major, but the bill is major. And so you can find yourself in a financial fix through no fault of your own. So there are a lot of reasons why we might be in that place. And so today we're going to look at what the Bible has to say as we look at some of its teachings, and also some just practical financial practices that can help us to get on a better footing if we're in trouble. And even if you're not in trouble, if you're in a pretty good spot financially, these can still be things to remind ourselves of, and or to maybe we're not doing all of them, because it's one thing to know what we should do, and it's another thing to actually do what we know we should do. And but we have difficulty, as I said. We tend to spend what we have. At least I know I do. I've seen that principle. If we have no problem spending money. And so it's easy to think, well, I want this and I want this now, so I'm going to get it now and not think about the future. And so if I'm not thinking about the future and I spend all that I have now, then I may find myself in a fix. We think of the story of the prodigal son. And usually when we think of the story of the prodigal son, we think of we think of a lot of things, but we think of the mercy of the father when the son returns, because that's the surprising part of the story, is the mercy of the father. But there are so many different angles that we can look at in the prodigal son story. One of the angles that we can look at is the son himself. Interestingly enough, the word prodigal does not mean somebody who wanders away. That's what it means to us, but actually that word means someone who wastes what they have. They waste their money. And that's what he did. That is just the story of this son. And I just remind you, this is a story Jesus made up to teach us something. It wasn't a true story, but it certainly could be true, and probably has been true a number of times. And so the son, he takes his father's inheritance early because he wants it now. He doesn't want to wait for the future. And then he goes off and he spends it all because he's not interested in the future. He's interested in being happy now. And so he spends it all. And again, like I said, many of us, we find ourselves in that situation, whether we realized it or not. And then he runs out of what he has. And oftentimes, in this story, that's when the famine comes and he ends up at the bottom of the bottom. And he is so desperate, When what the pigs are eating looks good, you're in trouble, right? And so this guy knew that he was in trouble. He knew he was at the bottom, and that's when he kind of woke up. He kind of found himself, so to speak, and realized, I could have a better life if I worked for my dad than if I'm doing what I'm doing now. So he found himself, but when he did that, when he woke up, it was pretty much almost impossible for him to get back on his feet by himself. And oftentimes that's what happens. We tend to live our lives and we react to the things that are going on in our lives right now. And sometimes we live beyond our income. And then maybe we've spent this year's income and some of next year's income. And then the famine comes. And the famine comes, and it might be any number of things. It might be an emergency. It could be a number of things. And then we have nothing left. We don't have money. We don't have credit even, and we are at the bottom of the bottom, and we wake up and we're like, oh my goodness. But it's very hard then. It's not impossible, but it takes a while to get yourself back out of that. And so we want to remember why we are here, because our culture tells us, our culture kind of communicates the message that we are here to consume as much as possible. We are here to consume, buy, until we die. And to be happy and comfortable, that is the highest goal in life. I just read yesterday that many Americans, most of us, are exposed to 3,000 advertisements in a day. That's hard to believe, isn't it? When you think about it, all the different places that we see advertisements, signs, billboards, magazines, social media, they're embedded in the social media, websites, TV, radio, advertisements are everywhere. And for some of us, depending on where we live in the country, it might be less than 3,000, but it's still a lot. And so we have these messages coming at us, telling us what is important and telling us a certain viewpoint of what's important in life. And it's hard to fight against that, even because we don't even realize what's happening sometimes. And so we feel that we need to consume. But we have to remember, in our Genesis reading, when God talks to Abram or Abraham, and God says that Abraham is blessed to be a blessing to other people. Through his descendants, the entire world would be blessed. So he says, you're blessed to be a blessing. And we want to remember, too, that our purpose and our reason for being alive is so much more than just consuming. Our purpose for being alive is a lot of things. It's to take care of our families. It's to take care of those around us, to be able to help people, to love God, to love other people, to make a difference in the world, as we sung about earlier. Our goals in life are much different than what the advertisements might tell us. And so that should inform what we do with what we have. So you want to know what your goals are in life, and then to be able to use what you have to go towards those goals. You want to be able to fulfill your life's purpose. And I know that sometimes it's really hard to know the specifics, but we know the general. We want to be able to be a blessing to other people. And let me tell you something, we are blessed. For much of the world's population, we are living the dream. Literally, every day, we are living the dream, even though it doesn't seem like it. Because everybody around us has the same things that we have, or maybe more, right? And so we are living the dream to the viewpoint of many, many, many people in the world. And so how can we be a blessing to others with what we have? Well, that can be hard, especially if we're in a difficult spot. And so we're going to look at some very practical things that can help us go in the right direction. It's not necessarily going to do away with all of our problems. It's not going to fix everything. But it can help, because oftentimes the way out of something is a slow and constant journey in the same direction. And so, first of all, two simple things that can really mess up any budget. Let's put it that way. Two things, we don't need to eliminate these two things, but we want to think about them. Number one is impulse buying. So that would be when we buy things we didn't plan to buy. Did you know that Fairway has peppermint bark Oreos? Did you know that? They do. They do. Probably other places too, but I was in Fairway last week and they have a bunch of peppermint bark Oreos. I didn't have that on the list. But we have 2 packages in it. So, you know, that happens. And, that's pretty harmless for the most part. 2 packages of Oreos are not going to break our budget, so we're in our budget, right? But nonetheless, if we did that throughout the grocery store every time I went shopping, or sometimes checkout aisles and things like that are designed for impulse buying. And it's okay if you do it and it's within your budget and you have that and you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But sometimes impulse buying can get out of hand if we do it to a greater extent than what we can manage, or if impulse buying is larger expense items where, I didn't plan to come home with this, but here it is. We can bust our budget when we do things that are either large or to an extent that we can't do it financially. That's when it becomes a problem. So that's something we want to think about. If we are going to impulse buy, we want to say, okay, is this something we can do? And so if I don't have money for those Oreos, I probably shouldn't get the Oreos. But I did. I had the money. So impulse buying is one thing that, again, we don't have to eliminate it, but it can be a money waster. Another thing would be eating out. I love eating out. It's convenient. It's quick. You don't have to do any work. And when you have a lifestyle where you're busy, if you're busy on a particular day, you just get home at supper time. There are some times when it's really handy to eat out. And even if you're not in a hurry, it's just fun, right? But the average American eats out 4 times a week. And that can add up if we let it, even without realizing it. It can become an extreme thing because, as we know, eating out is more expensive than eating at home. But it's hard sometimes because of our schedules or if we're in a hurry. But that's another thing to be aware of, is that eating out can take a lot of our income, more than we even realize. But some basic ideas to help us get on the right track, first of all, as I mentioned, is that we should all have a budget of some kind. Now, people do budgets in different ways. A budget is basically a thing that tells you where your money is going. Have you ever looked at your tax forms and you think, gee, I look richer than I feel? It's like, I see what all I made this year, but where did it all go? A budget can help tell you where it all went or where it all is going if you follow it. Basically, it's just a simple math problem. You put your income, you got your expenses, you got your other things if you have room for it, savings and things like that, and then you have what's left over. A good budget has 0 or almost 0 left over because, in other words, you're telling everything where it's going. So you are in control of your money. It's not in control of you because you tell it where it's going if you follow the budget. It only works if you follow it. But you know where your money's going, and you check back often to see how it is. People do it in different ways. Some people use I just have an Excel spreadsheet. Some people might have other elaborate forms of that, but it doesn't really matter how you do it as long as you do it. You can be a notebook paper for all that, But to have a budget, to know where you're going. These are in no particular order, but something that you want to have in your budget if you want to give to help other people, whether you're giving to the church or whether you're giving to other nonprofit organizations or whether you just like to help people, and you want to give to people in their time of need. That's what we call benevolence giving. And it's good to plan that out too, just like you plan everything else out. Because what I have found in my younger years is that if I don't plan out my giving, it's not going to happen. I will, if I spend what I think I need and want in life and then give what's left over at the end, there won't be a lot left because we are good at spending what we have. right? I mean, it happens, it's very easy. So it's good, just like anything else, to plan. If we want to be generous, if we want to be giving, if we want to help other people, if we want to give to good causes, then we need to plan it out so that we know that it will happen. So it just becomes a line item on your budget. And then the other thing that we want to keep in mind, in addition to keeping a budget, is to try to find a way, and this is really, really hard. And for some of you, this might not be possible in the present moment, but maybe you can work towards it in the future, and that is to live below our means. See, if this is your income level and you're living above it, you don't have any give, right? You don't have any extra, and many of us, we know this well. And so there's nothing to save, there's nothing to give. And even if we're living right at our income level, there's still really no wiggle room. There's nothing to save for your future. There's nothing to give. And so we're incredibly stressed at this moment. But if we can somehow live a little bit below our income, then we have some extra. And we can use that extra to save, to take care of our family, to save for ourselves, for our future, and to give to help other people. Now, as I mentioned, for some people whose income level just covers the bills, that is going to be very hard to do. And there are two ways that we can do that. Number one, we can increase our income. Sometimes that might be very difficult to do. There might not be a lot of options for increasing income. Or we can simplify our lives by trying to do away with certain expenses. That can also be hard to do. So none of this is easy, right? For some of us it may be easier than others, but it's not easy for everyone. So I want you to know that these are not easy steps, and they are challenging. But when we live below our income, we have some money that we can save for the future and that we can give to help others. So when we do those things, if we have extra, then what we can do with it is we can kind of create a buffer. And that's what we call an emergency fund. If you have a buffer, an emergency fund, it can protect you. What do I mean by that? Well, an emergency fund is an account that's separate from your checking account, so you can't just you're not going to just pull from it willy-nilly, but it's also not retirement, right? Because you get penalized if you take out of your retirement account. So an emergency fund is something that you keep, and some people give different amounts of what you should have in there. You can start with a small amount and gradually build it to, some people say 3 months expenses, 6 months expenses. But when you get a few months at least of expenses in an emergency fund, you shield yourself from some of the emergencies in life. So if your car breaks down, or you have a flat tire, or you need to replace your tires, or you have a medical moment, we'll put it that way, and you have a medical bill, you're less likely to have to go into debt or to use a credit card to get out of that emergency. You have an emergency fund that you can use for certain emergencies. It's not going to protect you from everything, but it can protect you from some of those smaller, large emergencies. And then once you have an emergency fund in place, if you have extra, you can save for retirement. And one thing that we know is that the younger you save for retirement, the better, right? There's nothing wrong with starting to save for retirement at 60, right? It's better to start saving any time than it is never. But the younger you are, the better, because time is on your side with interest compounding. And I even learned that even youth can save for retirement as long as they have a steady income. I didn't know that. And quite frankly, for youth, usually the more urgent thing is college. So, usually retirement is a little bit further down the line, and then so you're probably not going to be thinking about that. You want to get through that college hurdle first. But it's just to show you that the younger you are, the better position you are to save for retirement. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a ton of money every time. It can be a small amount of money. But a small amount of money is better than nothing, and it can grow over time and become something that can help take care of you in your older years. So these are all things that we can do. Small steps, and yet difficult steps. And you might be saying, some of you might be saying, yep, I'm good, I do all this. And some of you might be saying, I can't do this. I can't do this right now. I don't have the income. I don't have I've already got some things I need to pay for, I can't do this. That's okay. If you can't do that, the key is not to do all of these things right now. The key is not to just all of a sudden somehow magically change your situation so you're in a better place. The key is taking one small step in that direction. So whether that is trying to put a little bit of money into an emergency fund when you can, or whether that is trying to put a little money into retirement when you can, or whether that's simply, if you can't do any of those things, maybe it's simply, okay, is there an expense that I can look at that somehow I can decrease? And, none of these things are easy. But and maybe a first step, if you don't have one, is to do a budget, and you just put those figures in there and say, where am I at now? Because it's only when you know exactly where you're at now that you can even know what you need to do next to improve the situation. So if you do a budget and you find out, oh my goodness, at the end of the month we're minus 500. Okay, well that's not going to be very encouraging, right? But at least you know, and you probably already kind of know. And then you can say, okay, well, how can we help this math problem here? Is there anything here in the expenses that I can change? Is there anything that we can work towards changing down the road? And you can kind of start. But when we think about financial peace, when we think about, and today being All Saints Sunday, we think about leaving a legacy, right? We leave a legacy in many different ways. For our kids, for our families, for those in the future. A legacy of memories, a legacy of example, a legacy of life, a life well lived. And let me tell you, you can live a life well lived no matter what your financial situation is. You don't have to have a certain income in order to live life well and to leave a good legacy for the future. But as we look at what we want to do with our lives and how we can be a blessing to others and how we can bless people, when we are able to take care of ourselves and we are able to take care of our family, then we are in a better position to help other people as well in our lives. And so I want to encourage you, I know, like I said, it may be tough, but I want to encourage you, rather than to be in despair, just take that first step. Just take that first step and see where it takes you. Because if we want financial peace, we can pray about it, but we also need a plan. And so I would encourage you to make sure that if you don't have a plan, that you try to get one down so that you can continue living your life and that you can use what you have, your money, your talents, your resources, in a way that fits what you feel your purpose in life is. That you might fulfill that purpose to the glory of God and the blessing of others.